What we have on the bench is a Marshall JCM2000 dual super lead. Now this came in because the owner said it was blowing fuses. Now he hasn't used this thing in over a year, and he wants to put it back in service. So I haven't had one of these come through my shop, and any first-time amp coming through here, I get online and I do a bunch of research. And what I found out about this particular model is it has a real problem. It's called bias drift. Now, it didn't take much research to find this out. Try it yourself. Now, the source of the problem is that the main board in this amp, over time, becomes conductive, which affects the bias. So at some point in time, Marshall became aware of the issue, and they came out with a replacement board that supposedly fixed the problem. Now, I don't know if it really did or not. Some say it didn't, but it can take 10 years for the problem to resurface. Anyway, they don't make those replacement boards anymore. They stopped making them in 2024. So at this point, whoever has one of these amps is stuck with only a couple of alternatives. So a good question would be, well, how do you know it's got bias drift? Well, I'm going to show you. Now this amp provides an external port where you can actually measure the bias and adjust it. I'm not a big fan of this method, but I'll get into that later. Anyway, what you can see here is it's 75 milliamps on 2 tubes. Remember, this is measuring 2 tubes, which is the problem that I don't like. So watch the clock. Now 5 minutes later, it's gone up, oh, I don't know, 5 milliamps. Okay, no big deal. That may be normal. Now you notice the meter on the left is not moved that much, only the one on the right. So additional 5 minutes, now it's gone up to 85. So it's gone up 10 milliamps from when the amp was cold. Another 5 minutes, now it's at 95. Now, this is the second time I ran this test. The first time I ran it, I left it on. And it didn't take long for that meter on the right to get clear over 100. And since it had one of my tubes in it, because the amp came in with one of the tubes just being fried, I put one of my tubes in there. I didn't want to ruin the tube, so I stopped it right there. Now, if you notice the box up on top there, the upper number reads out in voltage, the bottom number in current, and that's the wall voltage. That's the power coming in, and you can see if you watch from the beginning, the current has also gone up. So I'm going to say, without too much reservation, that this amp suffers from bias drift. So what are the alternatives? Well, there's a guy in Australia that makes a replacement board. It's about $400, I guess. I have no reason to believe that it wouldn't work. And then there's this guy in the Netherlands who makes a kit called the Dr. Tube Bias Stabilization Kit. So this kit costs about 40 euros, and then you have to add in the freight. Now, if you're buying this from the US, you got to pay the tariff nonsense. Now, it does require some, rather extensive modifications, and but I'm willing to do it. I'd really like to know if this thing works, because if any more of these come in, I will have a solution for them. Now, the customer was contacted and given the 2 alternatives, and I also mentioned that I wasn't going to guarantee in either case that it was going to guarantee to fix the issue, because I don't know either one of these products. So he understood that and decided he wanted to go ahead and go with the Dr. Tube kit. And so I went ahead and ordered it. So while I'm waiting for the kit to show up from the Netherlands, I can do some preparatory work. And one of the things in the instructions is for pin 5 is to remove as much of the solder as you can. And I have this desoldering tool that I bought. I think I got it from Amazon, and It really wasn't very expensive, but man, does it make desoldering so much easier than trying to do it with a soldering iron in one hand and a solder sucker in the other. So part of what this kit does is remove a bunch of these long traces that run down the board, which are susceptible to current leaking across the board, conductive parts of the board, because they run right alongside other traces. You can see they're very close. And in this board, they run over to the area where it connects to the BIOS board. And you can see somebody's already had to replace some components in there. They probably didn't know what was really wrong. They just replaced the components because they were burned up or something. And they didn't realize that the board was causing the problem. All of that stuff except one resistor is going to get replaced with the kit. And you can see, I don't show it very close in this, but you can see where they replaced those components. Next, we're going to drill out those pins. So we're going to drill out the pin with a diamond annular cutter. These bits are usually used for drilling tile and stuff, but the regular annular cutters you get for a machine shop are too big. So these work really well. You don't need diamond, but that's the way they come. So they're kind of difficult to get started because there's no center drill or anything like that. And what I found out is you're better off tilting the drill and starting it into one corner of the drill. It doesn't walk around as bad. So you get it going, and then as soon as you get it to stabilize a little bit, you can lean the drill back vertically and perpendicular to the work and finish drilling it that way. But once you get it going in there, it stabilizes and runs pretty good. But it's really kind of hard to get started. The whole idea with this kit is to get as much of the BIOS circuit off that board as possible. And this Dr. Tube kit, the way I looked at it and traced it out, it really does. It's very comprehensive in how much it eliminates from the board. Now in V7, I ended up cutting through a trace that I couldn't help but cut through it because of the size of the drill I had, the diamond drill. But I ended up having to repair that, and just a hardwire repair is all I needed to do. So you can see there where I cut through the trace, and then I just replaced it with that hard wire, and it's not that big a deal. And if you have this particular board, you're probably going to end up having to do that because you really can't avoid cutting through that trace. And that's not the trace that feeds that pin. That's on the other side. So for now, this is all I'm going to really do until the package comes in from the Netherlands, which will probably be within a week or so, maybe 10 days. So the package showed up, and I was really kind of excited about getting to do the installation on this thing, so I got up the next morning and I did the installation and forgot to record it. So, sorry about that. Once you get pin 5 drilled out, the rest of the installation is pretty straightforward. Drilling out pin 5 is the hardest part. There's 2 electrolytic capacitors that have to be removed from the board. They get replaced on the new board. I'm pointing at one of them right there. I think it's C36 and C37. And there's differences in boards depending on the ISS number. The instructions do a pretty good job of giving you all the part numbers depending on which board you have. So the next thing you're going to do is connect your grid wires for V5 and 6, which are the red wires coming from the right side of the Dr. Tube board. And that's labeled connector 4. So the shorter wire goes to 6 and the longer wire goes to V5. So then we're going to connect the grid wires for V7 and 8. So it's from the left side of the board, the yellow wires, short wire goes to V7, and the longer wire goes to V8. So then you have to connect the signal path, which is in the center, and that's a red and yellow wire, and they have you doing a couple of twists in it. And those go clear over to the other side, and then you have the points, your connection points there. Now those are the plate resistors for V4, which is the phase inverter. One of those is an 82K, that's the red one. The other one is 100K, which is the yellow one. And what I ended up doing is, instead of just soldering to the little pads that are on the end of the resistors, I actually soldered the wires to the resistor leads, which gave me a much more substantial connection. Now we're bypassing those two coupling capacitors that are on the board, but they're replaced by the new ones that are on the new board. Now the kit comes with an additional connector. So when you put the kit in, from connector 1 that used to go to the existing bias board, that now connects to the new board, and the connector that used to go to connector 1 from the bias board now plugs into the new board. So it's pretty simple. Now I don't know if you can see it that easily, but this set of wires that go to the bias board are flipped around when they plug into the main board. And it's the same with the Dr. Tube board. They have to be flipped around. That'll become kind of important when we get into the biasing. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing reassembled and test it out. Again, yellow and red signal wires were rerouted after this. I kind of caught that, and it just goes, you don't really want that. It looks like it's going to be trouble running along next to those filter caps. I'm going to skip through a bunch of this. It gets boring watching somebody put screws in. So I already have the board mounted to that sub chassis, so I'll put the perimeter screws in, and then when I get to the tube sockets, the way they did it, I don't really like, because they're relying on these fat sheet metal screws to grab the tube socket and hold it in place. And once those strip, they're done. And I don't know what I'm going to do about that at some point. I'm not going to do anything right now, but at some point I'd like to have a fix for that. Now, some of the guys recommend that when you take this thing apart, that you mark the connectors for where they go. But some of these connectors are so tiny, and they're metal. There's no place to mark on them. So I didn't do that. I wrote down where they go. I wrote down the connection to where they go on those other boards. There's like 4 other boards. So to me, that worked just as good. And it gives me a record that I can use next time one of these comes in. So I just follow my notes and get all these connectors put back to where they belong. And I do a last minute check, go all the way back over everyone, make sure they're connected to the right connector on that board. And I'm really getting tired of saying connector. Now, if you remember earlier in the video, we did the bias test and kind of logged it over a period of time. So I'm going to do the same thing here after everything checked out. So it's basically 119. So just 5 minutes. I could have put a clock close to the bench, but I didn't. And I check it again every 5 minutes for 20 minutes, actually, and so far so good. So there's 20 minutes of testing, and it looks really stable. I think I'm satisfied with this. So right here I'm using bias probes to test the plate currents directly, which as you can see are quite a bit different. Now you won't be able to see that if you use the cathode method, which is what this amp provides. They add the two together, which also includes the screen current. So when you look at this, you see the bias adjusting screws. You would think the screw on the right adjusts the tubes on the right, and the one on the left adjusts the tubes on the left. Well, that's not the case. As I mentioned before, that cable was flipped around. And it's that way whether you're using the Dr. Tube bias kit or not. So right now I adjusted the tubes on the left using the screw on the right. So this is where I planned on doing a rant on amp biasing, which I've decided not to do because it's going to make this this video too long. I think I'm going to do it on another video because I have a lot to say about it. So I put this amp back together and I hooked it up to my 212 cabinet and rattled the windows for a while. So I'm going to say that the Dr. Tube bias stabilization kit does work. So thanks for watching.